I'm Jennifer Gilmour, and I'm an author and advocate for women in abusive relationships. I want to get to the answers to the questions that many have from those that work in the domestic abuse sector, getting an inside feel of what it's really like in their job role and sharing it with all of you.
So, hi everyone, welcome to #Abuse Talk. I'm delighted to have somebody from further up north with us today. It's Elizabeth from Abused Men in Scotland, and Elizabeth has joined us on #Abuse Talk for quite some weeks now and has given some really good insight. And I thought it'd be really good to share about what Abused Men in Scotland does and find out a bit more about what Elizabeth does. So welcome, Elizabeth. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Jennifer.
So first of all, I thought it'd be a really good idea for you to just tell us a bit about you and what you do with Abused Men in Scotland.
I'm a helpline support officer. At the moment, most of our support is provided via the telephone and email, and we support male survivors of domestic abuse, including transmasculine and trans men. And sometimes we support concerned friends and family members as well. We have started running drop-in sessions for people who live in Edinburgh and would prefer a wee bit of face-to-face support. But as I said, mostly at the moment is through telephone and email.
Right, okay. And so your role as a support officer then, what are you responsible for? Obviously you mentioned about telephone and emails, but I'm assuming these are like set hours for the phone line.
Yeah, the phone line is open between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. on Monday to Friday. You can leave a message outside of those hours and we'll get back to you. But please let us know if it's safe for us to call you back, because if we don't know that it is safe, we'll err on the side of caution and we won't contact you because we wouldn't want you to be put at risk. Any emails, if they're sent over the weekend, we aim to answer them as soon as possible within 2 working days.
That's great. So can you just tell me a bit about how long Abused Men in Scotland has been running and why did it open?
It started off as a very small organisation around 2010, I think. There was a small group of women who were concerned about male friends and family members who were experiencing abuse in their relationships. And they were trying to support their friends and relatives and trying to find out information about where these men can go. At that point in Scotland, the answer was nowhere.
Right.
And so these small group of women thought, well, if not us, who? And over the years, it's gradually expanded into a national helpline. I mean, they did begin with a kitchen sink, kitchen table operation, and it was all volunteers, but slowly and steadily, AMIS has grown.
I was going to actually lead on to that kind of question of, obviously it says obviously Abused Men in Scotland and it's up in the north, and I was wondering whether it was like a you know, just the geography of it, if it was better to keep it niche and to that area, would that be better support, or whether you found that people from the rest of the UK have started ringing and that's why you've had to sort of expand or consider it?
Because of devolution, the definition of domestic abuse is different here in Scotland than it is in Northern Ireland, England and Wales. And we've always had a different legal system here in Scotland, and so our area of expertise would be, you know, the legal system and the support that's available in Scotland. I mean, we do have some calls from people who live in Wales and England and occasionally Northern Ireland, but apart from giving some emotional support, especially if they're very distressed when they call, we try to refer them on to an organisation in their country or in their region, because although I personally have worked within the domestic abuse field down south, you know, things are moving on, the law is changing all the time, and it's much better from our point of view if someone has the specialised support that is tailored to their country and to their region.
And would you say, talking about sort of the different definitions, and I know you kind of spoke a bit and sort of asked questions about this, I think it was about maybe a month or so ago on the discussion, which I found really interesting. Do you think there is a massive difference between the different countries in the UK to do with the definitions and the different laws?
I'm ashamed to admit that I don't know that much about Northern Ireland.
Okay.
I know that before they had the political upheaval and Stormont closed down, they were looking to introduce coercive control legislation, and that already exists in England and Wales, and more recently in Scotland. So they've had to put that on the back burner because Stormont isn't sitting at the moment. So as things stand, coercive control is illegal in, you know, 3 out of the 4 countries within the UK. But even just going back to the bare bones of the definition, in Scotland, the government definition seems to be quite gendered.
Right.
And there is a small section which the Scottish Government's Equally Safe plan that says we recognise that abuse happens to men and boys too. So things are getting slightly better here. I think in my experience, and this just might be my perception, in England and Wales there seems to be a little bit more recognition that abuse can happen regardless of gender identity, sexual orientation, age, ethnicity, religion, and regardless of ability or disability. And I think in England and Wales as well, definition is a bit broader in that it includes family members who were over the age of 16. And here in Scotland, domestic abuse is just seen as something that happens between intimate partners or ex-intimate partners.
Right. It's quite interesting though, isn't it, to look at sort of the different sides, you know, of it. And on Abuse Talk, we have people from different countries, so I'm always trying to find out the sort of differences that we face. And I was shocked when you've published the news about the coercive control in Scotland, because I think in the sides of, for me originally, I was very much like, well, this is just the law in the UK, but I didn't expect the differences. And unfortunately, sometimes there is that difference, and I feel like it's a good step forward for someone that is forward in that direction. So I also wondered, for you as a person working for Abused Men in Scotland, then, what is the most challenging thing about your job and your role?
Sometimes we need to try to find a refuge space for a man, because it is so dangerous that he can't stay within his home or within the same area. And that can be quite challenging, because until relatively recently, there were only 2 organisations which had refuge space available. And now, due to funding cuts, there is 1.
Right.
So it can be quite challenging to get people to safety. But I think even less serious cases that can sometimes be, you know, quite challenging. I think sometimes men need a little bit more time to feel comfortable and to open up about their experiences of abuse. I mean, especially a lot of the time, I hear, well, I'm not being abused, but, and then they describe coercive control, and they say, well, I'm not frightened, but I sleep in the bathroom with the door locked. So I think partially the challenges would be, you know, trying to keep people as safe as possible, you know, and that's difficult for me personally, when I know that someone needs to be removed from the situation. And I try my best, but sometimes there's just no space available in refuges around Scotland. So after difficult calls, do have a debrief with colleagues, and I'm able to take a little bit of time out so I'm okay before I support anyone else.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, especially in your kind of job role, and listening to all those kind of things that are happening to those, you know, men, that it's important that you look after your mental health and well-being. So it's really good to hear that there's already like a process in place for that. Do you find that you struggle with that, or do you think the process works, or do you think that I don't know, like you still go home and feel like you've got that kind of weight or the thoughts or it on your mind, basically?
I think the process does work during working hours. Like I said, we have the debrief, and we're able to take a little bit of a break if it's a difficult call, and another colleague will pick up, you know, the next call or email. At home, I am scrupulous about my self-care, because to me, it's the difference between, if you see someone struggling in a river and they look like you're drowning, if I jump in myself, I might get into trouble and I might drown too. But if I'm able to throw them, life raft or the rubber ring, I'm able to support from the shore and, be okay myself. And I would be more effective help if I'm able to leave it behind.
Yeah, no, I absolutely really love how you've described that. Thank you for that. So why do you think it's important to be gender specific?
Well, I think it's mainly because there was a gap in provision when AMIS first began. There are organisations dotted around Scotland who were a wee bit more inclusive. I mean, there's one up in the Highlands and there's one in the Central Belt. But when we first began, there was the support available for women and children.
Yeah.
And that was it. And sometimes Scottish Women's Aid were willing to support male survivors, and sometimes they weren't.
Right.
So, yeah, that's why it was set up, to cover the gap in the provisions. I think.
Do you think because I think it helps in a way of being gender specific. I know some people might not agree with that, but I would imagine that there might be a difference in the resources and in the type of support that you give. Would you agree with that, or?
Yeah, I think so, because obviously there are some core aspects of abuse which are very, very similar, no matter who's the perpetrator and who the survivor is. And yet, because of things like gender stereotyping, etc., and how people feel that a woman should be, how people feel that a man should be, it can be better to speak to an organisation where you feel comfortable. And there are some aspects of abuse against men which would be different of abuse against women. What we find is if a man has been abused, he tends to stay for the children. And I realise that a lot of women would want to stay because of the children. But from a male perspective, because the expectation is that the children would stay with their mother, that the male parent, the father, wouldn't want to leave the children alone with someone who is abusive. And sometimes an abusive parent will try to withhold contact or threaten to withhold contact. And obviously, there are occasions when there is a very good reason for parents to withhold contact. You know, they're worried about the safety of their children and, about, you know, the other parent's behaviour. But when there are no genuine concerns, you know, that is a form of abuse.
Yes, it's really difficult, and it's difficult to be able to sort of recognise that as well, because of that, the gender side of it. So, what if you could abolish a myth surrounding male victims? What would it be?
Ooh.
Hard question, really.
Just one?
Well, you can mention more than one if you want.
I think one of the biggest myths is that men are never survivors. And unfortunately, there are still some people who think that AMIS are here to support perpetrators.
Oh, right.
And that is just not true. There's a lot of statistics that get bandied around.
Right.
That more women are affected by abuse than men. And we do know that there's underreporting. Women underreport too. But a lot of our callers, for example, have never ever been to the police about any abuse. And so they're not picked up in the statistics. And I know from a few years ago, there was a similar issue about women underreporting as well. I think these figures come from England, though, that on average, a woman would need to be assaulted, I think it was 36 times before she'd be willing to call the police. But those were for a few years ago from England, so I'm not sure how accurate they would be now. I think there's a lot of underreporting, and that has hidden the scale of the problem. I think in 2017, the Police Scotland report on domestic abuse, they found that of all the call-outs to domestic abuse incidents, 20% of survivors were male and 80% female. And we find that figure is kind of inversed, whereas around 80% of the people that call us say that they haven't reported to the police.
Yeah. Yes, it's really difficult to really get a true statistic, and that doesn't help the work that you're doing, or the sort of moving on, and when you're trying to make changes.
Yeah.
I think it's always important to report in a sense, and you know, I've said to a few people to, even if they feel uncomfortable, just to log it, so it's logged on the system if you feel that it's inappropriate behaviour, and you know, years later when you feel able to, it could help. And like there's apps now, so I don't know if you've heard like about the Keep. which I think is such a good idea, and perhaps would help maybe men more, I'm not sure. And also we do have a few men that join in with #AbuseTalk. So I find it really helpful that you're there. So if I ever need
Thank you.
direct, even though sometimes they're not in Scotland. But yeah, even that advice and that knowing there is support, because I feel that there are a few men that join in that feel that they're unable to get the support, which is really upsetting. So if people want to find or find abuse men in Scotland, how would they go about either getting support or in general, how do we find you?
Well, in general, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and we've got our website, abusedinscotland.org, and you can contact us by email, and that's contact@armis.org.uk. The helpline number is 0808 800 0024 between 9 and 4 Monday to Fridays.
That's great, and I will pop all of the information in the description of this video, so if anybody wants to directly link and click through to their emails, they can do. So I just want to say a big thank you for answering those questions. Is there anything that you know that you feel is burning that you would like to say or let people know, or even if there's men that are watching this video and they are maybe feeling that they're unable to have that initial phone call or talk to you, what would you say?
Well, I've just remembered when you were mentioning about logging it, I don't know about in England and Wales, but in Scotland we have domestic abuse liaison officers.
Right, okay.
And they're not responsible for investigating incidents of domestic abuse. So if you would like to just log information about a partner's behaviour, you're able to talk to a DALO,
right,
and they will record all the information, but an investigation will not be opened without your permission.
Right. No, that's great. That's useful information. Thank you for that. It's good to know, isn't it? Because it's sort of different, and there are domestic abuse support officers, but from what I know, the police tend to sort of delegate to the local authority, local support or victim support and things like that. But for example, out of my situation, I just logged a few incidents that were never taken forward. I just did it on the 101 number. And then coming forward now, when something maybe happened that was a larger or it was time, then all those logs really help support, the sense of where to go next. So, or even I kept a diary, so having that to sort of remember, especially if there's like gaslighting, and so you can take your own recollection of everything that's going on. But again, I want to thank you, because there is clearly differences in the definitions and in the law, and we all seem to be in a different point of the race line kind of thing. So it's really interesting, and we really appreciate you joining in and giving us an insight really into your job role. So thank you so much again for joining us. I just want to let everyone know that you can hop on now to #AbuseTalk, and I'm sure Elizabeth is going to be over there 8 till 9 p.m. GMT, and the next interview is on the 4th of September, which feels like really far away, but it is the 4th of September, so pop it in your diary to tune in and watch the broadcast. So thank you again, Elizabeth, for joining. Such a pleasure to really kind of meet the person behind the profile, and really interesting, and I'm sure that viewers will agree that it's so informative and so important to share, you know, even the role that you do, it's so important. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, Jennifer. It's
No
been really interesting talking to you.
That's